Can you turn your microphone around? There we go.
Thank you. I'd like to call this February 10th meeting to order of the BZA Board. Ms. Ragsdale, do you have a roll call?
Mr. Shelton?
Here.
Mr. Brumfield?
Here.
Mr. Yeaman?
Here.
Mr. Easley?
Here.
Ms. Warren?
Here.
Mr. Craddock?
Here.
Mr. Stone?
Here. Let's all rise for a moment of silence, and then we'll follow by the Pledge of Allegiance. You can be seated. Hopefully all the members had time to read over the minutes for the agenda for our meeting tonight. Do I hear approval for our agenda?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Yeaman called for the approval and Mr. Brumfield second. All in favor?
Guess we needed to make a vote, don't we?
Motion carries. Do I hear approval of our minutes in the last stated communication?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Alan Eason, second by Mr. Yeaman. All in favor, vote on your screen. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, we're missing somebody on the...
I just wanted to check with that. I see there's 6 votes versus...
We got 1, 2, 3, 4.
Might be me.
Don't we have 7?
Mr. Yeaman?
Mr. Yeaman? Yeah.
I voted. Yes, okay.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ragsdale, do we have any old business at this point?
We do not have any old business.
Any new business?
We do not have any new business.
For the chairman's report, we have a new member tonight, Mr. Odie Shelton, who spent 29 years working for the county in the zoning ordinance division. We appreciate your service. We also appreciate you joining the board and like to thank you for being here and look forward to your input.
Well,
Really
thank you. I'm glad to be here. And I never thought I would be here. I helped get Ron Merritt appointed. Been a while back. And when I saw him, both of us aged a lot.
Thank you.
But,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your comment.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The time is 6:04. I'd like to open the public hearing. Pursuant to Article V, Division 7 of Pittsylvania County Zoning Ordinance, we, the Board of Zoning Appeals, have been empowered to hear and decide specific applications and appeals in support of said ordinance. In accomplishing this important task, we are charged with promoting the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of Pittsylvania County. We must ensure that all of our decisions and recommendations be directed to these goals and that each be consistent with the environment, the comprehensive plan, and in the best interest of Pittsylvania County, its citizens, and its prosperity. Anyone here to speak to the board other than the applicant regarding zoning cases will be limited to 3 minutes. Ms. Ragsdale, the first case is case S-25-007, Jonathan and Shannon Mize.
Case S-25-002, Jonathan and Shannon Mize have petitioned for a special use permit on 1.66 acres located on State Road 822 West Sunrise Drive in the Tunstall Election District to allow for the placement of a double-wide manufactured home in accordance with Pennsylvania County Code, Section 35-223. On January 7th, 2025, the Planning Commission recommended by a 7-0 vote with no opposition that the petitioner's request be granted. The staff summary is enclosed in the board packet. Mr. Chairman, Jonathan and Shannon Mize are here to represent the petition.
Mr. and Ms. Mize, would you like to come down front and speak on your behalf? Thank you. Do we have anyone else signed to speak?
No one has signed up, Mr. Chair.
Okay. If there's no discussion, no other things to be said, I close the public hearing at 6:06. Any comments, questions, concerns from the board?
There are the mobile homes in the area, and I think it's a very suitable place. So I see no opposition. I move for a positive motion.
Mr. Yeaman, I agree. We buy there myself, and very similar. I'll read a positive motion, and we'll see how it goes. Whereas Mr. and Mrs. Mize has petitioned the Board of Zoning Appeals a special use permit for
Should be a double-wide manufactured home.
double-wide manufacturing home, and whereas we can find no substantial detriment to the adjacent property, that the character of the zoning district will not be changed thereby, and that such use will be in harmony with the purpose and the intent of the ordinance, and whereas there are no significant adverse effects upon adjacent property owners that cannot be mitigated through conditions, I move the special use permit be granted, and there are no conditions. Is that right?
Staff did not recommend any, no.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Alan Easley, second by Mr. Shelton. Motion carries. Mr. and Ms. Mize, I hope you enjoy your new place. Thank you for coming out. The time is 6:07. We'll open the case S-25-003 for Chaco Solar LLC.
Case S-25-003, Chaco Solar LLC has petitioned for an amendment to the conditions placed on special use permit S-20-012 on 15 parcels of land totaling 907.88 acres located on State Road 57 Halifax Road and on State Road 640 Java Road in the Bannister Election District for utility scale solar energy facility. The staff summary is enclosed in the board packet. On January 7th, 2025, the Planning Commission recommended by a 6-0 vote with opposition that the petitioner's request be granted with the conditions recommended by staff. The chairman, Mr. Chairman, the representatives from Chaco Solar LLC are here to represent the petition.
Thank you, Ms. Ragsdale. Would someone like to speak on behalf of Chaco Solar?
Good evening, members of the BZA and staff member. My name is Yingwen Sung. I'm the project developer for Total Energies. With me here tonight are Dalton Carr, who directs development in this region, and Cadrick Whitmore, our counsel. We develop, build, operate, and own energy projects across the country. We'll be discussing an amendment to an existing special use permit for Zenith Solar, formerly known as Chaco Solar. To summarize the amendment, we're asking a bit more time on the permit to account for the delay caused by the electric grid operator, and at the same time, we will be updating the projects to work within county's current zoning ordinance as outlined in the staff report. We do have some folks here tonight supporting the project. Not everyone is going to stand up and speak, but if I may, could I ask folks here to who are supporting the project to raise their hand?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'd like to go through a short presentation just to provide a little bit more details and background on the project. Chaco Solar Project spans 15 parcels totaling 907 acres. It's located on Highway 57 Halifax Road and State Road 640, or Java Road. It's in the Bannister election district. A little bit of history on the zoning and the special use permit. The parcels were zoned A1 agricultural. On September 8th, 2020, SUP was approved for Chaco Solar Project, subject to 17 conditions. The SUP approval had certain setback, screening, and buffering requirements in accordance with the zoning ordinance at the time of the approval. The zoning ordinance was amended a few times since the SUP approval in 2020. Amendments include significantly increased setbacks beyond what was approved in the SUP. The SUP currently expires July 1st, 2025, based on Virginia Code. From 2023 to 2024, we engaged with county staff regarding timeline and amendment of the SUP. On September 21st, 2024, we submitted an application to amend conditions of the SUP in accordance with the current zoning ordinance. Our request includes, first, modifying the site plan to meet new setback and screening standards, and second, seeking an extension to align with PJM interconnection timeline. To provide a little bit more background on the SUP extension request, we can take a look at the project development timeline here, which highlights how the SUP is tied closely to the interconnection process. As I mentioned earlier, this SUP was approved in 2020, as you can see on the bottom of this slide. The original SUP expiration date was aligned with the interconnection timeline under the standard process on top of the screen, which is meant to enable construction commencement in 2022 and commercial operation in 2024. From late 2020 to mid-2023, the grid operator, PJM, underwent a process queue reform and established a new process while holding the queue in limbo for 3 years. The SUP was extended to July 1st, 2025, based on state code, offering limited relief related to COVID-19. However, based on PJM's new process, the interconnection study will not be completed by that deadline. As a result, we are requesting extension of the SUP to allow Chaco Solar to complete the interconnection study process with PJM. Despite the delay caused by PJM interconnection queue reform, TotalEnergies has committed to advance the project throughout this period, inclusive of site control extensions necessary to meet interconnection timeline, refresh of environmental studies and agency consultation, advanced engineering study and design, coordination with PJM and utility on grid interconnection. We posted another $1.1 million in financial security on January 21st this year, necessary to proceed to phase 3 study. With this additional deposit, Chaco Solar have placed a grand total of $2.3 million in financial security at risk in order to advance the project on the fastest possible timeline. We will also kick off procurement work and network upgrades following receipt of interconnection service agreement in Q3 this year. and we anticipate 2 to 3 years of PJM system upgrades and construction at project cost prior to commercial operation, end of 2028. The staff and Planning Commission recommends approval of this request with the following changes to the conditions. On the setbacks, establish a 150-foot setbacks from all adjacent property lines, 200-foot setbacks from any bordering residential properties. For landscaping, we will be required to establish a 100-foot wide landscaped area and submit a landscaping maintenance plan for approval prior to construction and site plan approval. The start of construction shall be within 2 years of the date of the modification of the SUP conditions. And we're required to submit a viewshed protection plan to the Director of Community Development for approval prior to issuance of permits. That summarizes our request.
Does anyone have any members of the board have any questions?
I would like to ask the applicant, will your project go forward without federal subsidies? You know, things have changed in Washington, as most everybody here knows, and those subsidies may not be available.
That's a good question. The project will still be developed and built even without the subsidies. And as of today, we have not, heard any. We do not anticipate any change of subsidies. But that being said, we'll still be able to develop and build this project absent the subsidies.
Can you tell us a little more about the view shed? That's a new phrase. What's your plan for that?
Yep. So for the view shed and protection, and obviously the visual screening, we are planning to dedicate an area of 100-foot wide landscaped area, and we'll be planning trees as needed to supplement existing vegetation. And those trees and shrubs will be native and obviously adaptable to the region. One row of those evergreens will reach a minimum height of 25 feet. And all the evergreens or shrubs planted will be at a minimum of 6 feet at the time of planting. Yep.
If I may, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my name is Kedrick Whitmore. One thing I wanted to add to that question, is a very good one, is that this viewshed protection, the setbacks, and the landscaping, these are all consistent with the current requirements under the zoning ordinance that has been updated since that initial approval. So all those plans will be reviewed in accordance with the typical procedures of county staff. Post any kind of approval, we will still be going in, having these view sheds reviewed, and that'll be all part of that administrative review.
So the view shed is really no different than what we've been doing in the past with the 100-foot, 150-foot setback with 2 rows of trees and shrubbery.
That is consistent with the current. And when this was approved initially back in 2020, those did not exist, and those were not there. So as part of our conversations with staff, they said, hey, look, if you do want to move this forward, you're going to need to comply with the current conditions that are more stringent, and we're happy to do that.
Any other questions?
I have one. I'm not familiar with this PJM, the group that coordinates the movement of electricity for connection to the power grid. I know we have approved other solar panels, and they've already been done. Some of them are done and in operation. I know for one that was hooked directly to Dominion. What is the difference with y'all's operation?
Those projects, if they're utility scale solar projects, they would have gone through the same interconnection process which with PJM, the only difference will be those projects would have, submitted or entered the queue a bit earlier than us, because PJM did not start this queue reform until end of 2020. And there were plenty of projects that entered the queue years before that, and those projects did not get impacted by this queue reform. I think we were a bit unlucky, and Dalton might be able to provide a little bit more details, but I believe the cutoff day was just a couple months before our application entrance day. So if we were, if we had we entered the queue just a few months earlier, we wouldn't have been impacted by this queue reform. But here we are today, so we're trying our best to, build this project and make it online as quickly as possible.
Do you anticipate, you're saying that you're not going to start the project until it's approved by the PJM? Or would you start construction immediately if it's approved so that you would go online sooner?
So this project, we wouldn't be able to interconnect to the grid if PJM does not approve or does not complete the studies of this project. Now we anticipate receiving an interconnection agreement from PJM, which administers our connection to the grid, right, by Q3 of this year. And as soon as we receive the interconnection service agreement, we can start kicking off procurement and project design and planning on our end to align with PJM's own network upgrade timeline. So we need to really work hand in hand with the PJM process.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Earlier you mentioned that there were some individuals here that supported this project. Are these individuals residents of Pittsylvania County?
Can I have those? Yes, I believe so. Those are landowner partners, but just, I guess to make sure, can I have those who are residents of Pittsylvania County just raise their hand again? Thank you.
And are these individuals the landowners of this proposed extension of this project?
Yes, some of these individuals are.
They live close by the site that you're going to develop.
Yes.
I have a couple questions for you also. In several areas along the road out there, there are already forested lands. In that setback from that area, would those trees that are there stay?
So our goal of meeting the vegetative screening requirement of the county is to use existing vegetation as much as possible. And then we supplement that with, evergreens or other vegetation that are native to the region. So yes, if they're already there and they could serve the purpose of providing a visual screening for the project, and we will utilize that.
Excuse me, a concern of mine, we have done solar farm projects in the county. We have heard things from the project folks that they were going to do this and they were going to do that. One of the things that to me have been an issue is the, excuse me, the landscaping, the visual effect that's left with these solar projects. 100 feet or a tree that's planted that's 6 feet tall, it's going to take it quite a while to get to where it completely hides something behind it, 10 years maybe. A lot of this project is visible from 57. I'm wondering if the company would consider in those very exposed areas to the road where there is no current native vegetation, if the company would consider something along the lines of a berm with the trees planted on top of that berm before the project begins.
Could you repeat that? Could you repeat your last sentence? If we would consider placing a,
As an example, on 57, there's a large amount of land that is open to the road.
yep,
It's going to take quite a while for 6-foot trees,
yep,
3-foot shrubs to grow to a height that's not visual, and that seems to be the thing with the general community is
yep, I understand.
not crazy about the sight of a solar farm. And I'm wondering if something can be done ahead of time instead of at the end of the project.
Kedrick, would you like to take this one?
Actually, I'd like to see if we could take a look at the presentation, because I do want to make sure we're talking about the right location, so that we're all clear on where we're talking about. So we have the, let's see here.
I believe he's referencing the south side of 57.
On the south side of 57.
Okay, along Halifax
Yeah,
Road.
57. And actually on the north side of 57 also, there are two very large areas there that it's going to take quite a while for that area to be covered up enough that you can't see the solar farm.
Sure, if those are growing.
Just
And actually, it might be helpful to understand, I don't know if anybody from staff would be able to answer, but kind of what that process is for review of that viewshed plan and the trees. I believe we have to submit a plan that's going to go through review, and that as part of that viewshed protection plan, those impacts will be reviewed. And if there is an inordinate impact based on staff's review, that there would be additional screening requested or required. If I've misstated it, Ms. Ragsdale, please let me know, but that's my understanding of the process.
That's correct. So what staff would do is we would review that plan to look at ways that we could protect areas that have a larger impact to the view shed. And that may be then putting in the screening prior to panels in areas where that's feasible. It could be, increased screening if it's needed, but the board always has an option to place additional conditions on the special use permit, even above what staff is recommending, if you feel that it's necessary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? So I believe you mentioned that the project would go to operation in 2028, fourth quarter. When do you believe that you would start construction on the project?
Yep, that's our anticipated commercial operation day. And we anticipate kicking off the construction process about 12 to 18 months before that. Ideally, sometime in early to May 2027.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. And can you mention your name again? I'm sorry.
Yunwen Sung.
Son?
Miss Sung, yes. Thank
Have
you.
a seat. We may have some more questions for you in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Odek, do we have anybody
We do.
signed up to speak?
Robert Gregory.
Mr. Gregory, could you come up to the microphone there? Mr. Gregory, you are limited to 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Robert Gregory, and my wife Sue, my sons, and myself farmed the home place that my great-great-grandparents started out on in 1838. and it's about a mile from the eastern edge of this proposed solar project. Like so many here tonight, we're busy and not inclined to meddle into the things that other people do on their own land. I'm commanded to to not judge my neighbors, but to love and respect them, which I intend to continue doing, regardless of the outcome of this meeting tonight. I've come to you because you've solicited input from interested citizens on extending the special use permit. We are interested because we're concerned about the 2,000 acre per day loss of farmland in the United States. This is reported by the American Farmland Trust. These losses are permanent. If the topsoil is disturbed or removed, no future generation will be able to grow crops or timber there. Who might eventually own these leases or even these lands? Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Communist China? What happens when the federal taxpayer dollars become unavailable to these solar companies? In 2020, the Virginia legislature and former Governor Northam enacted a law that commits Virginia to generate its electricity exclusively from carbon-free sources, such as solar, by 2050. Now, if we continue the current tactics, we may ultimately need to dedicate hundreds of thousands of acres to solar panels. I hope we can all begin to see the great error in this. Friends, we need to understand this demand is primarily driven by a proliferation of data centers in Northern Virginia. A majority of the solar development, however, is occurring in areas such as Southside Virginia. Pittsylvania County already has more of it than any other county in the state. It's too late for those farmlands. We can choose not to add to the problem yet again. Prime farmland is an easy target to cannibalize and cheaper than installing solar panels in old parking lots and rooftops in cities where they should be. There are numerous places known as brownfield areas in Northern Virginia cities that could and should be used for this purpose instead of permanently obliterating farmland. Harnessing the sun's energy has valuable potential, but it should be done with proper long-range planning and not at the cost of permanently destroying farmland and damaging the environment. I want to thank the board members for hearing these concerns that are shared by many of us. And common sense tells me that your willingness to serve on this board means that you want what's best for your county, including its farmland. We don't need to continue to permanently ruin and sacrifice our very best for the benefit of big tech companies who do not have our best interest at heart. Thank you.
Robert Mills.
Mr. Mills, thank you for being here.
I'm Robert Mills. I'm from the Callens area, And first and foremost, I'm not representing any organization tonight. I serve a lot of them, but tonight I'm representing Robert. And I come to you tonight as a farmer from the western side of Pittsylvania County, a first-generation farmer. And the only reason I'm a first-generation farmer is because there was land available for me to start my operation, and much of that land on the early days were rented acres. And it offered me the opportunity to build the operation that I have today. I'm proud to say that my son is the second-generation farmer on our farm, and he has taken our operation to new heights. But the limiting factor that we have to grow our operation and to grow our legacy as farmers is the absence of agricultural land for us to work, rent, or purchase. I'm here tonight not to pick sides, not to say that one side is wrong or one side is right, but I watched you all talk for 5 or 6 minutes about setbacks, and not one thing was said about the 980 acres of agriculture and forest land that will be gone for all of our generations that are here in this room. Pittsylvania County has permitted 17,000 acres of solar. We're the largest in the state. 2 years ago, I asked a Board of Supervisors member from Bedford County, I said, what does your solar ordinance look like in Bedford County? He said, Robert, to be honest with you, we're going to see how bad Pittsylvania County messes it up, and then we're going to develop our ordinance. It goes back to the old saying, no one is completely useless. They can always be used as a bad example. Pittsylvania County has been a place that I have been proud to call my home as I have traveled all across this county, across this state, across this nation, and even across the great oceans. I've always been proud of Pittsylvania County. The last several years, we have made some decisions. We've made some decisions that we didn't have all the information that we needed. Gentlemen, you're at a point tonight that we have had solar here for several years. You know what it looks like. You know what it has done to the agriculture and forest land in this county. It will take hundreds of years to rebuild that topsoil. We've seen how it has changed the landscape of communities that were once beautiful, vibrant agricultural communities. Folks tonight are here for both sides of the aisle has a purpose for why they're here. My purpose tonight is because I want to have a future in agriculture, because I believe there's a future in agriculture. And there are a lot of young men and women across this county that has that same belief, that same passion that I have shared for 35 years. And that's the passion that they believe that there is a future here in Pittsylvania County to be a farmer, a producer, a forester. Ladies and gentlemen, you have an opportunity tonight to stop that train. Not many times in life do we have do-overs. But in 2020, you made a decision. Not knowing all the facts, you made the decision to do that based off the information that was shared. Well, now you have it in hand. You can ask your Board of Supervisors, remember, what is that economic return? And everyone will tell you it was not the cash cow that you were promised. Ladies and gentlemen, I just ask you tonight, don't think about today. Think about those future generations of agriculturalists that are many years behind me. We're a 400-year-old industry. Agriculture in Pennsylvania County employs the most people of any business that's located in this area. I believe in the future of agriculture in Pennsylvania County, and I pray tonight that you do as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
Kathy Ramsey.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Ramsey.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Ramsey. I'm from the Bannister District. I have 3 things that I want to focus on, and you've heard this several times before, so I won't go into depth. That is health, wildlife, and land value. No benefit to the citizens adjacent to and across the street from the project. meaning citizens know that they're not going to get any benefit from it, and the only thing that could happen when it's time to profit from selling their homes, it may be a problem, because who would want to buy property with solar panel farms across the street or adjacent to their property? One of the responsibilities of the zoning board is to ensure zoning that is safe for the community. I may have missed the update on the solar farms throughout the Pennsylvania County. And when I say that, the update and letting the citizens know the pros, the cons related to the solar projects that's already in existence. The citizens in the Chaco community that live near the projects and the solar farms are against the project, and we are praying that the zoning board will remember the concerns when you vote on the project and extending the request of the Chaco Solar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ramsey.
Keith Atkinson.
Keith, would you like to come down front?
First of all, I would like to thank the board for allowing me to speak, and a special thank you to Ewan and the Chaco Solar Project team for their prompt response to our concerns. There are several things we must have to sustain life: water, food, shelter, and for me, electricity. I grew up in a house that did not have running water or forced air heat. We had a hand-dug well. Once I was big enough, my job was to go down the hill and get the water. We also had a wood-cooked stove and a coal stove for heating the main area of the house. I carried in the wood for the wood-cooked stove and coal for the coal stove heater. When I was 12 years old, we finally got a bathroom with a shower, and I thought I was in heaven. That's why, in my opinion, electricity is one of the most important things we have. I believe I could live without a car, but not without electricity. Now, things are changing at a very rapid pace. Everything is becoming electrified. Even John Deere is making large tractors, farm tractors, lost my place. Bicycles are being made also electric. To make all these things work requires a lot of electricity. Chaco Solar Company is working to supply some of that power. They have applied for and received the necessary permits 5 years ago in the Chaco Java community. They have run into a delay, and they need an extension for the necessary time to complete the project. New requirements by Pennsylvania County are requiring the solar company to make some changes in the landscape surrounding these homes, which some folks mentioned earlier. The solar company will plant evergreen trees, which will be a minimum of 6 feet tall at planting, and multiple rows of trees will reach a minimum of 15 to 25 feet in height. If anyone here tonight, Alan, is concerned about how fast these trees grow, I can tell you from experience. I planted a row of these evergreen trees, cypress, Leland cypress, and in a few years, you could not see through them with a microscope. Not too long ago, the cost of power at our home was approximately 8 cents per kilowatt hour. Today, they cost us 14 cents per kilowatt hour. My wife just paid the bill. Chaco Solar Project may not stop the cost of our electricity from rising, but it could easily stop it from rising so rapidly. My wife and I have looked at several completed solar projects. The area surrounded by these projects was very neat. with grass and trees growing on it already, it doesn't seem fair to me to deny the Shockoe community the opportunity for additional power because we will certainly need it even in the Java Shockoe community in the future. The solar farms do not produce any pollution, unlike other things. The air and water will stay clean, and I would not be a part of any project that would adversely affect anyone's property. Your consideration is greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Keith.
Pamela Adams.
Ms. Adams?
Good evening. My name is Pamela Adams. I live in the Java community, 1880 Stone Road. I do own one of the parcels of land that is in this Shockoe solar farm. And tonight, I've heard many people speak. Most of them are people that I know and love, for it and against it. And I do admire and respect all of them. I want to tell you tonight, we are asking for you to support these 4 amendments that's owned. The project was approved 5 years ago. But now, the developer wants to bring it up into the current increased setbacks and the buffers. It will not look like what we are seeing in some of the projects that's already been built. Okay, so when we talk about 200 feet from a residence, if you all watched the Super Bowl last night, and you didn't look down, but you looked where he was standing on the 50-yard line, and he was trying to kick that ball way over to the goal line, that's 200 feet. And so that's how far it will be from a residence. Now, in that 200 feet will be 100 feet of shrubs and trees, and as Keith just said, they will start out at 6 foot with a minimum of 25 feet, which is pretty tall. If you think about it, 25 feet is about the size of a 2.5-story house. So if you have a 2-story house and then you have an attic that you stick your Christmas tree in, and then you can't even stand up, but you can bend over. That's what 2.5-stories look like. So if the trees are already there, and I think one of you asked that, they will stay there. And where our land is, there are many areas where there's already some trees, and they will stay there. I'm gonna move on. So I know some of the neighbors are very concerned about the lack of agricultural land, and I heard the topsoil. So I don't know if you know this or not, but in the 50s, many of the farmers, especially in the Java area, they sold the topsoil. Now, I don't know anything about farming. I did not farm. My father left me this farm. He farmed it. My brother farmed it, his son farmed it. They actually went back in. I don't know what kind of farmers. They were tobacco farmers. They were able to raise nice crops from that. I don't know how they replenished the topsoil. Maybe you can ask later, but they did. And one of these farms that's in this solar project, they sold the topsoil off of. So that is possible. We also know that in the contract, when it's over, when they decommission the solar farm, they will take everything and it will leave it in its original. I know this because the lawyer who drew this up, she assured us that this would happen. It's in our contract. They will take everything, they will clean it up, and they will leave it like it is, except maybe the topsoil. So tonight, I'm asking you to please pass these amendments. It will also bring in a few local jobs. Now, the site preparation will be hired locally if possible. The fencing, the landscaping will be hired locally if possible. Even some of the construction. Then We're going to have someone to maintain the landscaping, so when one of those trees do die, and that does happen in Pennsylvania County, they will replant it immediately. So tonight, I'm asking you for support of this solar project.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Melody Shelton Clanton.
Good evening, esteemed members of the council. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Melody Shelton Clanton, and I am a native of Pittsylvania County. I am not a current resident of the county, but I do own a farm in excess of 100 acres, less than a mile from the site of the planned project. So I am a taxpayer of Pennsylvania County. I was a former teacher at Chatham High School, go Cavaliers, and I currently work at the Virginia Department of Education. And as a legacy landowner in our rural community, I want to share why a solar farm is not only beneficial, but also a positive addition to our landscape. First, solar farms represent a sustainable way to harness the abundant natural resources of sunlight, reducing our reliance on non-renewable energy resources. This shift to clean, renewable energy benefits us all. One of the biggest advantages of a solar farm is the economic boost it can provide to our community. A solar farm will generate steady, long-term income, which supports the local economy. This income can be reinvested in the community, creating opportunities for those young farmers, for new businesses, for infrastructure and jobs. Additionally, solar farms can increase the value of land, attracting investment while maintaining the rural character we all cherish. A well-designed solar farm doesn't need to be an eyesore. This project will be integrated into the landscape in ways that are sensitive to the surrounding environment. With proper planning, solar panels can be placed in areas that minimize disruption to views and preserve the open, scenic beauty of the land. Many solar farms are installed with natural vegetation around the panels, which can even enhance the local ecosystem and biodiversity. A highly esteemed agricultural lawyer drew up the contract for this land use and specifically incorporated line items to provide for this type of planning. Studies show that solar farms can coexist with agricultural land, allowing farmers to continue cultivating crops or grazing livestock around the panels. And I've seen this for myself. I have 2 children that are currently living in Colorado, where there are many solar farms, and there are livestock that coexist with these solar panels, and they are not an eyesore. This flexibility makes solar farms a win-win for both the environment and landowners. Instead of viewing it as an eyesore, I see it as an opportunity to maintain the integrity of our community while embracing the future of energy. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you.
Janet Shelton.
Good evening. As you can see, I didn't come prepared as the others did, but I just want to say a few words. Rodney and I do have a farm in the solar project. And I know you've heard mention of how many acres is in the solar project, but less than half of the farm itself, our farm in particular, is less than 40% that will actually be in this project, because the rest of it's woods and ponds, and it will stay woods and ponds in the project. It will not be changed in that regard. And Rodney and I bought this farm when we first got married. I was 18, he was 21. We worked a long time to pay for it. Rodney is a tobacco farmer, me working for panel knitting and grinding up for 5 years, and then the Postal Service. And it has not been easy, but we did it, but slowly over time, we were counting up. When we got married, there was more than 30 tobacco farmers in Java, easily, and we kept counting. There was more. Now there's 2. And it's not because people didn't want to farm, it's because everybody's moved away from tobacco and it's gone overseas, like many other things. There's countless farms in Java that are now split up in our housing developments. Just because you may not put the solar farm there does not mean it'll stay a farmland, because farming is becoming more and more difficult to make a living. Even when we did it, we were a two-income family. We were never just solely supported by the farm, because one thing, you couldn't afford health insurance. You had to have that health insurance some way. And anyway, we support this, and we hope that you too do as well. One thing that I think is unclear, and it may or not, maybe everybody understands it, but if you vote down these amendments, they still have to July to start. And if they start before that time, they don't have to follow these amendments because it's already been voted on, already been passed. Am I correct in that? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is all that signed up to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Ragsdale. Anybody from the applicant solar is anything that you would like to add based off what you've heard?
Mr. Chairman, we just usually ask if anyone else in the audience would like to speak. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Odig. Thank you. Is anyone else that was not signed up that would like to speak from the audience? Come down front and state your name.
I'm John Gregory Lumba. We're about a half mile from this project. We go to church with these folks, their friends, their family. We love Chaco, but I love my family more. And what scares me is, to start with, this is a subsidized industry. If you're subsidized, you're not a viable business. Secondly, if you look at computers 20, 25 years ago, they're bigger as TV and 2 feet deep. And if you look at computers today, they're that size or smaller. Now, the technology on solar panels is in the same boat. These solar panels today, in 5 years, not going to be efficient, but they're going to continue to use them because it's not viable to tear them down and replace them with something that's newer, bigger, and faster. The other thing is, I'm mighty afraid that this is going to be the next Superfund cleanup, which is going to affect me. I'm 68, but it's really going to affect my children and my grandchildren. And you can say, well, it's taxpayers. Yes, it's taxpayers. That's what we do. Nobody prints money. They do print it, but we end up having to pay for it. Last but not least, the condensate that falls on a solar panel is just like the inside of a car, and it's raining and you don't have an air moving. The windshield gets fogged up. The condensate inside of a solar panel, when it leaches out into the battery, and the batteries do fail and they leak, it goes into drinking water. We don't have city water. We all have wells, and it's going into our wells. And that scares me because that's my children, my grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Is there anybody from Chaco Solar, the applicant, that would like to make any comments off what you've heard tonight?
Heard a couple questions from the public. I'd like to address, I guess, one of the questions that talks about future land use of those parcels and some statement about no future generation or can farm anymore. So the land can be reverted back to agricultural use after the solar project is decommissioned. The useful life of the solar project is roughly 25 to 35 years, and it can actually provide a recovery period, increasing the value of that land for agriculture in the future. Giving the soil a rest can also maintain soil quality and contribute to the biodiversity of agricultural land. And evidence suggests that the long-term effect of solar panels on farmland are minor and manageable, especially because decommissioning obligations, like some of our landowners are saying, is a standard process in our solar contract. And just to add a little bit more on the decommissioning part, this project, we are obligated to go through a decommissioning process, and the decommissioning process will reclaim the land back to open land, removing the facilities, including the solar panels and cabling, wiring, and any other facilities associated with the project. Unless it's mutually agreed upon between the landowner and the facility operator. And in accordance with the county ordinance, decommissioning has to be completed within 12 months if the facility ceases to operate for a continuous period of 12 months. And we are required to submit a decommissioning plan to the county and post security. So those are all mentioned in our ICP approval conditions. So just wanted to address that question.
Thank you. Anything else? Anything else? No?
No, that's all. Thank you.
At this time, it is 7:01. We'll close the hearing. Mr. Odak, we have a request from the board member to take a 5-minute break to go to recess. Is that fine?
That's fine. Obviously, you can't speak about public meeting outside the public hearing, but you can take a recess.
5-minute recess.
have a question for Ms. Ragsdale. Does not this exceed the 2%? I know this was before, but that the Board of Supervisors put forth for the saturation of solar panels in the different districts?
So when this was approved, that 2% was not in the ordinance. That was adopted after this project was approved, or the special use permit was approved. So their project is already calculated in that percentage that we currently have. So yes, we are over 2% currently. Their project is in that calculation of what we currently have approved. So this would not be an addition unless it expires and then they were to reapply. They would not be able to reapply because we have exceeded that 2%. But as it stands right now, they can amend conditions on an existing special use permit because they are already calculated.
Thank you.
Ms. Ragsdale, you mind, while you're speaking, commenting on what things you added to the special use permit that wasn't in there before and why you did that? If you don't.
So when this was originally approved in 2020, a landscape buffer was required, but it was only a 15-foot wide landscape buffer comprised of staggered row trees. Staff has recommended that that be increased to a 100-foot wide landscape buffer, which is what our current ordinance requires. Additionally, the setbacks that were in place at the time that this was approved were 35 feet from the edge of the right-of-way, 10% of the road frontage with a minimum of 10 feet, and a 40-foot rear setback. Staff has recommended that if this request is approved, that is increased to a 150-foot setback all the way around the project, so that would be front, side, and rear. If it is adjacent to a property with a residential use, the setback from that property line would be 200 feet instead of 150 feet. Additionally, when this was approved, the fire and rescue training was only required if there was battery storage on the facility. This facility does not have any battery storage, so staff has amended that to say that they would provide training to the local fire departments for solar, relating to solar energy facilities, not specifically battery storage training. And then a view shed protection plan was not required when this was, this special use permit was approved. So it is required in our current ordinance, so staff also recommends that that be added. And staff felt that this was a proper time, because the state code granted an extension, and you can look back to 2009, Virginia state code during the General Assembly, the legislation has been passed giving extensions to all special use permits throughout the state of Virginia for one reason or another. And so that has continuously happened since, I believe, 2009. This was prior to the deadline for bills to be submitted for the General Assembly session for this year. So staff felt if they were to get another extension, staff wanted to make sure that this project was a better project, provided increased screening, increased setbacks, additional regulations that would further separate this use from adjacent property owners. So without amending the conditions and adding those conditions, we don't have the ability to go back and do that if they were to grant another extension at the state level. So that's why staff recommended approval and then recommended approval of increased conditions to place some more restrictions on the project to bring it more into compliance with our current ordinance, as if what would be applied to any projects if there were any to be approved today. So does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. If this board did approve this, and condition number 12 states that the project is to be started within 2 years, My question is, then can the state, the code of the state, come back and even give them a much longer extension?
Yes. There's nothing to say that the state can always override, they can supersede our local ordinances. So if they pass legislation that automatically grants an extension to all special use permits throughout the state of Virginia for one reason or another, the latest extension was given for COVID. But if they do pass legislation that gives that extension, that would supersede any restrictions that we had placed on any special use permits requiring that use to commence within a certain period of time.
Mr. Dadak, do you want to speak to any of that as far as where the General Assembly is and what they've done in the past?
Yeah, you know, as Ms. Ragsdale mentioned, they've granted these continuously since 2009. We have reached out to contacts. We're not aware of any pending bills that grant any further extensions, so there may not be any further extensions. We don't have the resources to say that definitively, but at this time, no one's aware of any bills that grant any further extensions on the state level.
Mr. Shelton?
Are you ready for motion or anything? Or y'all want to discuss it more?
Any other questions or discussions from the board members?
Well, I'll go ahead and discuss what I think about it. The land lease fees for these things are so much. The landowner can't hardly turn it down. The farmers or whoever it may be. And we got so many of them throughout Pennsylvania County, we got to stop somewhere. And I think when I go through Pennsylvania County and see all these farms that used to be in beautiful grass and corn, and soybeans and wheat, and they covered up these solar panels, I take a different route so I don't have to look at them. I feel like we got to stop somewhere, and we're going to be covered with these things. I've never seen so many out there, and when they abandon these things, there's no guarantee that 3 generations down the road that somebody's going to clean this up. They say they are, but when way back when we started the solar panels, I talked to some people in North Carolina that they had banned them, and they couldn't clean them up, the state wouldn't clean them up, and the people that had them, some third party, had ownership in Africa somewhere, and they're not going to come over here and clean them up. And I'm scared we're going to get stuck with a lot of cleanup in Pennsylvania County. And I know I feel sorry going against these property owners that can make a lot of money with these solar panels. And I'm just coming on the board, and I want to be consistent. So I'm ready for a negative motion. But if this board wants to approve it with conditions, I have no problem with that either.
Any other comments?
And Ms. Ragsdale, maybe you can help me with this. In the decommissioning, we speak of a bond.
That's correct.
And these bonds are there in the event that the company pulls out and leaves, does not do the cleanup, then Pennsylvania County holds a bond.
We do. We require, before any permits are issued for these projects, we require a decommissioning plan and a decommissioning cost estimate that's prepared by an engineer. And it details exactly what has to be done to decommission this project, including removing anything down to gravel if the property owner does not want that road, any interior roads that were put in for the project to remain. That cost estimate is submitted to my office. We do not allow salvage value to be included. So a lot of companies will try to include salvage value to reduce the price of that bond. We do not allow that to be included, so we hold a bond for the life of the project for that entire amount that it would cost to decommission the project. That bond cannot be released unless we are given notice and another bond is put in place prior to the release date of that bond. And it does have to be revisited periodically to account for inflation and things like that.
Any other comments?
I got one more question. Can the attorney and Ms. Rankdale guarantee that this property can't be leased to another person, party, individual in the future?
In terms of assignment, I mean, I don't know if there's anything that prohibits assignment. They're still bound by all the conditions. It runs with the land, not the owner. I'm not aware of ordinance prohibiting assignment, but they're bound by the terms of what's approved.
We do have it is in our ordinance that before ownership can transfer, the company has to notify us and give us proper notice so that we have contact information for the new owner and can make sure that everything is in place prior to that, that transaction. But there's nothing that prohibits them from leasing it to another company.
So if that other company is somewhere in Africa, and they don't want to come over here and clean them up, we don't have no way to make them clean it up, right? They're not coming over here from another country.
We hold that bond, so what would happen is they have 12 months from the date that it stops generating power for 12 months to start decommissioning. If they haven't decommissioned the project within that 12-month period, then the county would cash in on that surety bond, and we would use that money to clean the project up and restore it back to previous conditions.
Any other comments?
Yes. My concern is this board approved this back in July 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. Then a 2-year extension was granted, and now there's a request for 2 more years. I understand what's been shared with the board this afternoon, what is causing the delay. So my concern is the continual delay and the additional 2 years that they're requesting. If I was going to support this in a positive way, I would be looking more like 6 months. If the group wants to develop this project, there needs to be some movement, some construction started. Even if we granted 6 months, they would have up to January of next year to get started. But 2 years that would be given 7 years to start a project. We all know that we've seen projects in the county that move more quickly. But that is my concern, that we're just constantly giving more time.
Any other comments? We have here for a negative motion. First, I'd like to say that there is the option that if we vote against this, then we will get the recommendation from staff that we got when the project was originally voted on. One of the benefits, in my opinion, of what is happening here with the extension is that we have an opportunity to make this project a little bit more scenic. And so by voting a negative motion, then we run the risk that this solar company could potentially start this project and meet the obligations from the original SUP. So I just thought I would add that to it, but I'm ready to call for a vote on a negative motion based off of what I've heard. Is that what we have? Okay? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, what you're saying, and I understand and agree with it. Ms. Ragsdale and our attorney has made it fairly clear that the county is at the bottom of the rung when it comes to things that are going along with the state, with the federal government. And if the state wants this project to continue, we can vote for it, we can vote against it. If I've got a feeling if we vote against it, then it's going to get passed on up to the state, maybe to the court, where the judge would have to make a decision on it. And the state has mandated that we're going to generate a whole lot of electricity in the state of Virginia. And today we've got the opportunity to maybe dress it up a little bit, maybe make it a little more palatable to the folks in Pennsylvania, and allow the people in Chatham and the surrounding community to use that property as they see fit. They've worked all their lives to build these farms and properties, and this is what they wish to do with that property.
Thank you. Call for a negative motion to vote on that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I'm making a negative motion.
So, Ms. Ragsdale, I'll read this negative motion and then we'll vote on that.
Yes.
Whereas Chaco Solar has petitioned the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit for case number
S25003.
Thank you. Whereas we find substantial detriment to the adjacent property owners that the character of the zoning district will be changed thereby, and that such use will not be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. And whereas there are significant adverse effects upon adjacent property owners that cannot be mitigated through conditions, I move the special use permit be denied. Do I have a second?
Second.
Call for a vote. Five, we have
I hit yes. Okay.
a motion to deny.
It should say failed. I'm not sure why it says passed.
So the motion to deny has failed. At this point in time, is there a call for a positive motion? Yes. Okay. So I'll read a positive motion.
Well, before the positive motion is read, I'm assuming you're reading a positive motion with all the conditions listed.
Well, as recommended by staff, is that, you just need clarity, is yes.
Yes.
Which it's either by recommendations made by staff or
Okay, so
other conditions.
right now you're reading a positive motion that what we have before us here.
Yes, a positive motion would be including the recommendation from staff, and I assume that the Chaco Solar is agreeable to all the staff recommendations.
This is the time to make the recommendation, but I still, gentlemen, lady, I have a concern about condition number 12. I think 2 years is too much time. I can support a positive motion, but that time needs to be reduced. In my opinion. I don't know how other members of the board feel.
Kevin, could we ask the applicant about a
Could you come back up?
timeframe?
Could you update us on the time frame, if possible, if it could be reduced?
Sure. So I hadn't come up before Dalton. I'm with Total Energies as well on the development team. I hear you on the time frame and how many times this has been extended. The original approval back in 2020, the extension for COVID, but we're still talking about the same issue. And so at first, I want to just maybe contextualize the extension we're asking for, right? So Yunwen walked us through the transmission timeline, which kind of rules all when it comes to these projects. Just as disclosure there, normally that process where we ask the grid operator to approve our injection of new power takes about 18 months. So the reason we approached the county when we did in 2020 to get that approval was in line with that receipt of approval to inject power. A totally unprecedented delay. It's never happened before within this multi-state grid that there's been a delay or a stoppage of the process. And quite honestly, it's because there are so many retirements of power plants. It's also unprecedented in our lifetimes, and so many new plants trying to come online. And so with that, we had already dipped about 2.5 years into that transmission review process, which again is supposed to take less time than that in total, when it was halted and when we were placed in limbo. By limbo, I mean the grid operator didn't communicate any of this to us. They just said, hold tight, we're thinking about our process. We'll come back to you once we have a new process affirmed. That caused about a 3-year delay. A little more than 3 years total given this new process, but about a 3-year delay to our timeline, which was oriented totally toward not only the permit we have with Pittsylvania County, but also the original transmission timeline. And so when we came to community development to ask for additional timeline, we had sharpened down to the minimal time we thought might work for our project on that request. That 2-year additional timeline is very tight as it is because we received a greater delay than that, right? We're talking about a 3-year delay and we're asking for 2 years of extension. This extension is entirely relevant to that delay and nothing we could have done. So as Yemen also explained, we've carried this process as quickly as possible at great financial risk in order to make it happen as quickly as possible with the transmission operator. And of course, we now see the light at the end of the tunnel. We couldn't have said this a year ago, back when we hadn't heard enough from the grid operator about the new process, but we've carried through 2/3 of this new process now. We're calling it phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. They're already starting on phase 3 for our project, and we have placed more than $2.1 million at risk for the project to get that far. That process ends this summer. And when that process ends, the grid operator demands that we furnish all of the upgrades that are due to the entire transmission system, the grid, in order to make our project work where we're not causing congestion, and we're also making sure that the lines are rated for the new power on them. And so all of that happens this summer. The reason we're asking for more time is we want a chance to pay that amount to the grid operator. We want a chance to have them schedule for us when those fixes are going to happen and mobilize for construction. If the extension is offered or it's granted at less time than 2 years, we're not sure it'll be helpful to the project, right? We're talking about potentially, and Yen wanted to kind of walk through this, a couple of years for just the transmission upgrades, and we start construction midway through those upgrades because the grid operator also establishes milestones, when we backfeed power and when we can actually operate. And so, obviously for a project where it takes about 12 months to build the thing and be operating at the end of those 12 months, we don't want to extend that to a 3-year process, right? Because then we're doing a lot of waiting around. So what we're trying to do is just make this work with our new transmission timeline. We're not delaying anything on our own part. We've advanced this as quickly as possible, and again, at great financial risk. And that's where we've landed at these 2 years. We feel 2 years will help the project, and realistically, it gets us 1.5 years, right? Because as of right now, the permit expires in July of this year, and instead it would expire in February of 2027. So we're not getting a full 2 years. We're getting 1.5 years, and we believe we can make that work. Again, shortening it down to about 1 year, we don't believe gives us the time we need. We won't have our schedule oriented with the grid operator by that time. We'll still have potentially 2-3 years of upgrades, that are happening that start late this summer. They don't start until then. And so we need more time. We don't think we can shorten beyond 2 years. And again, what we're talking about here is an exchange, right? And I've heard a couple of times the worry that the state legislature is going to step in and say, you know, we're going to go ahead and extend unilaterally, regardless of what the county wants, we're going to extend the permits that have been approved in the last couple of years for some reason or another, right? This vote is an opportunity to take control of how this project is built, right? We're extending 2 years, yes, but we're also complying with new ordinance standards on setbacks and screening and several other things that render the project a better neighbor, you know, a better sited project, more responsibly sited project, right? And so that power that the county takes in, you know, in accepting these amendments to the SUP and granting us more time doesn't change if the state, for some reason that we don't see right now, steps in and says, we're granting extensions. It would be an extension to this approval with the greater setbacks and with the greater screening. So this is a more responsibly sited project that we need a little bit more time on, and that's the consistency of the ask.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do I hear a recommendation for a positive motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So I'll read a positive motion. Whereas Chaco Solar has petitioned the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit for case S-25-003, and whereas we find no substantial detriment to adjacent property owners, that the character of the zoning district will not be changed thereby, and that such use will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance, and whereas there are no significant adverse effects upon adjacent property owners that cannot be mitigated through conditions, I move the special use permit be granted with the following conditions. Ms. Ragsdale, do I need to read all the conditions, or we just have them in the listed?
If you are not amending any of what staff recommended, you can just state with the conditions recommended by staff.
Okay. With the conditions recommended by staff.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
All in favor, vote on your screen. Motion carries 5-2. I want to thank everybody for coming out and all of their input that they put into their discussion tonight. Meeting adjourned.